Hi everyone, you're watching the lab demos at cloudsecuritymasterclass.com.
Security Group is an AWS firewall tool which is used for enforcing network access control for your AWS resources like EC2s, RDS, or other compute and database services. In a big organization with multiple AWS accounts, management of security groups can quickly turn into a nightmare. Firewall Manager, which is a security management service, provides some relief in this regard by providing a centralized interface to configure, control, and manage the configurations of thousands of security groups deployed across all of your AWS accounts. In essence, AWS Firewall Manager has the following three use cases with respect to security groups. One, it can be used for creating and applying baseline security groups to AWS accounts and resources. Number two, it can be used for auditing and cleanup of unused or redundant security groups. And third use case is the one which we're going to demo in this video lab, which is for auditing and controlling of security group rules to identify rules that are too permissive and high risk. So let's start with our demo for auditing security groups using Firewall Manager. So let's start with some setup and prerequisites for this lab. The first prerequisite for using Firewall Manager is to enable AWS Organizations. Now we are not going to enable AWS Organizations in this lab today. We already have a video which covers that, and I will link that in the description. But what I can show you is that I'm currently logged in to this account ending in 6803, which is the master or the management account for AWS Organizations. Which essentially means that this account has control or authority over other AWS accounts to be able to do actions on their behalf, right? So this is the menu for AWS Organizations. Right now you can see this is the management account, and this is what I have logged into here. So the first thing that now we are going to do is I'm going to go to Firewall Manager, and I will enable Firewall Manager from the management account. And you can only do that from the management account if you want to control resources in other accounts. So the first option it gives me here is get started. So I will click on that, and this is what is asking me is like, which account do you want to use as the administrator account? And as I said, it can only be the management account. So I'm going to put the ID and click on create administrator account. So with that set up, now I will go to one of the member accounts and demonstrate the setup of security groups and EC2 instances from that account so that we can see how Firewall Manager created in this master account can be used to control or audit the configurations in one of your member accounts. So the member account that I'm going to use will be Scratchpad A ending in 5404. Okay, so I have logged in to the member account Scratchpad A with account ID ending 5404. And what we're going to do first here is to set up one more prerequisite for AWS Firewall Manager, which is to enable AWS config. Now, config is a configuration management tool at AWS. It stores the configuration changes for all your resources over time, and it is also the resource that's used by Firewall Manager to track the different configurations of your security groups. So it's in effect the auditing tool that Firewall Manager uses to figure out if the configuration of the security group is different from what we have defined in the firewall management policy. So we need to enable this for this account. So let me go to settings and click on edit and enable recording. Now if you're coming to this menu for the first time, your setup would probably look a little different. Since I've already enabled config previously in this account, that's why the menu was coming like this. But for you, it might look like get started, and then you will have to select the configuration here, which I'm doing right now. I'm just going to select all defaults and click on create a bucket here because config needs to save its configuration in S3 bucket, and click on save. So with that saved, I have enabled the prerequisite for Firewall Manager in the member account. Now I'm going to go to the setup where I want to set up some security groups which are purposely designed to be insecure so that we can see if the firewall manager is functioning in auditing as expected. So security groups, and I'm going to create a insecure DB access. In the inbound rule, I'm going to add port 3306, which is the port for MySQL DB. And in the source range, I will enter any public IP address to demonstrate this. So the idea is that databases are generally private resources. They should not be accessed by public IP addresses, and we want the firewall manager to detect that insecure or high-risk behavior. So I've entered here my IP address, which is the IP address for this laptop here, but this is a public IP address, and you can put any public IP address to test this. And I'm going to click Create Security Group. Just a description, secure access to DB. And I'm going to create one more security group, which will mimic the behavior of our secure DB access, just to test the other side of the equation as well. And in this one, I'm going to address the same port and source. This time I'm going to keep a private IP address, something like 10.0.0.0/32. And this would be our ideal or our secure behavior, which we want the firewall manager to not notify us about. Okay, with those two security groups created, I'm going to create an EC2 instance in this account, and I will attach that EC2 instance to our insecure group so that we can also see the scenario where if the firewall manager would detect this EC2 instance running from an insecure security group or not. So I'm going to click Launch Instance. I'm going to select the default free tier eligible AMI here, and instance type, probably do nano. And for network settings, I'm going to select existing security group and attach the insecure DB access to this EC2. And I'll click on Launch Instance. So with that setup done, we are ready to go to Lab 2 section of this video, where we're going to see how we will create a security policy in Firewall Manager to be able to detect this insecure pattern. All right, so I'm back in the member account 6803, and this is the account from where we have enabled Firewall Manager. And what we're going to do here is that we're going to create a security policy that allows us to audit all of our member accounts. And in order for us to actually set the security policy, we also need to create a security group rule. And this can be called an audit security group rule, because it's essentially going to be your ideal or the most secure configuration that you want. And then what Firewall Manager would do is that it will assess or audit all the other security groups with respect to this configuration. So I'm gonna click on security groups here and create a group called Firewall Manager. And then in the inbound rules, again, I'm going to select the same port 3306, the one that we want to audit. And in the source IP, I would address the entire 10.0.0.0/8, the entire CIDR range for the private IP ranges, right? And this is just a demo to show that, hey, we do not want any other connections coming to this port, which is the MySQL DB port, from public IP addresses. We only want this to be allowed from 10.0.0.0/8. So I'm going to click on Create Security Group. With that created, I'm going to go back to my Firewall Manager menu and click on Create Policy. Now there are other AWS services that you could create Firewall Manager for, but for this purposes of this video, we are concentrating on Security Group. And the exact use case that we're going to use is the auditing and enforcement of security group rules. And also keep in mind that the security group policies that we're creating are regional resources. so they are only applicable to a particular AWS region. Keep that in mind because that can cause a lot of troubleshooting issues later on. So I'm going to give my policy name, policy description. In the policy rule options, I'm going to click on create a custom rule. And in the custom rule, I'm going to add the security group that we just created. And this is essentially saying that we only want to allow the rules defined in this security group. If there is anything else, it would be detected and notified to us. And so there are two actions that you have, right? You can identify resources or detect resources, but you also have an option of auto remediating those resources based on the security group that you provide, right? For this demo, we are only going to detect, but keep in mind that Firewall Manager also allows you to automatically remediate resources based on your organizational compliance and other policies that you want to do. I'm going to click on Next. And here is the option where Firewall Manager tells you which accounts do you want to apply this policy to. You can include all accounts in the organization, or you can specify individual accounts, right? For this demo, I'm just going to do all accounts. I know that the other account that I have set up my demo for is part of this organization, so whatever I do here, it would be applicable to that account too. And then you also have a specification here to determine which kind of resources you want this to detect, right? So we're going to do definitely EC2 instance, we can do ENIs, and we can do security groups. So I'm going to say include all resources that match the selected resource type. So any of these resource types, if they do not conform to any guidance in the policy, they would just show up in our Firewall Manager menu, and would be able to know that these resources are not compliant with our policy. And with that, I'm going to click Create Policy. Okay, so now that we have our policy created in Firewall Manager, we're going to show you if the policy is first of all working as expected, and also how does this policy actually detect security groups, right? So I'm going to switch over to the member account where we have created the config rules, and where we have enabled the config, and we also created a security group at EC2 instances, and see what's happening in that account first. So I'm back again in my member account, Scratchpad A, and I'm going to go to the config menu, and immediately you're going to notice that some things have changed here since we enabled Firewall Manager. Essentially, Firewall Manager has now created a configuration rule here, which allows us to detect non-compliant AWS security groups. So you can tell by the name that this is a Firewall Manager manage rule. And what you can also see is that this rule has some detections. Within this rule, you can see that we have 3 resources which are showing up as non-compliant. And these are the same resources that we created earlier in the lab to demonstrate this insecure access, right? This is the security group that was called insecure DB access, which was having 3306 port enabled to a public IP address. This is the EC2 instance, which is attached to the security group. And this is the ENI, which is attached to the EC2 instance, which essentially gives it a network interface for the VPC. So we can see behind the scenes how Firewall Manager works. It creates a config rule and uses that config rule in order to determine or detect insecure configurations. Now let me switch back to the Firewall Manager and see how the screen looks there. So I'm back in the organization account, and this is the Firewall Manager policy. Let me click on it and see what it says. So it shows that we have 3 accounts as part of this organization. One is obviously the main account, the organization account, which is what I have logged into here, which is this one. The other 2 are the member accounts. Now, one of them is 6803, which we have not configured for AWS config. So it says that cannot create config rule in this account, so because you have not created that. But the other one, the one in 5404, it says one or more resources are out of compliance. So let me click on it. And again, it shows the same resources which we saw in AWS config screen. And it tells us that these resources are violating your audit security policies. Um, so the purpose of this part of the video was just to show you, show and test that AWS Firewall Manager is detecting non-compliant AWS security groups as expected. So I'm back in the member account for the final segment of this video. And the final test that we are going to run here is that I'm going to go to the EC2 instance, which is showing up as incompliant right now. And I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to change the security group from the insecure DB access that we created to the secure DB access, and see how if the firewall manager is able to see that and be able to change the alerts in the console. So I'm in the EC2 instance, and I'm going to click on security, change security groups. And as you can see, we have the insecure DB access here. I'm going to remove this and add the secure DB access and click on save. Now we can quickly confirm this by going to the config in the same account, and it takes a minute. It's not instantaneous. It takes some time for AWS config to detect this configuration. But right now it shows us as 3 non-compliant resources. And let me pause this video and come back to it once this is showing up as compliant. Okay, now we can see that the 3 resources that were showing up as non-compliant here have been reduced to just 1, which is just the security group. So the security group still shows up in this menu because the configuration of the security group is still there. It's not attached to any resources. That's why you don't see any EC2s here or ENIs. So that means, even I think this was just within a minute that AWS config was able to detect that change, and it's reflected here. Let me go back to the main screen and see if the same is reflected back in AWS Firewall Manager as well. And so I'm back in the organization account, and I can see the same thing is reflecting here. I just have one security group here. I am not able to see EC2 or ENIs attached here. So that concludes our demo here. Keep in mind that Firewall Manager, in the capacity of auditing security groups, also has the functionality to automatically remediate it. We showed you how to detect these configurations, but feel free to enhance the solution to suit your needs.
So this is it for the lab walkthrough. Keep watching out for more videos and articles at cloudsecuritymasterclass.com.